I'm Anne-Marie. I'm a customer success manager here at Dovetail.
And I'm Sarah. I look after customer success and support here at Dovetail. Really excited to meet all of you and get to spend the next hour or so with you.
So today we'll be walking you through Dovetail 101, and really the focus here is twofold. So we'll walk through a couple of options in regards to how you can migrate past research into playback as part of collections. And then we'll talk you through how you'll go through your research journey from data collection through to creating insights. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to kick things off with just a quick practice around how businesses, smaller to enterprise, can sort of think about migrating some of the past research into Dovetail. I think that this is really a big topic, particularly as you are considering what's important to you. I think when we talk to customers, some of the things we hear is like, we want to make sure that the research that we do have is sustainable, and so we can reuse as much of it as possible. And that, of course, the cost of formal research is super high, and we're quite attached to the research that we've done in the past. So we have been creating some features to sort of help you capture and make some of those hard choices. So I wanted to highlight this one called Collection. So I'm just working on the sidebar down the left-hand side. And something that you can do is actually bring in a section of your past research into Dovetail in a quick and easy sort of 3-step way. So the first step for you is going to be thinking about, okay, what past research do I actually have as part of my organization? What's important and how have we previously done things? Maybe it's readouts, white papers, decks, and that might actually require some mining from you to actually find those and bring them into the product. So that would be your first step. The second thing that you can do once you've sort of decided on what content you want to bring into the product is actually add them. So in this collection, this one is quite bare, obviously, for this example, but I've summarized this as this is a collection of research that was completed between these dates on CPU and CX in 21. So you can simply click this Add Files button and select from either a native upload from your computer or pulling directly from Google Drive. So as I mentioned, these are your sort of distilled reports and findings, typically past research in this instance. I'm actually going to select from a couple of files. You can actually bulk import up to 100 files in one go and drop them into your repository. So I'll start off with these two. I've chosen a couple of PDFs, but in terms of limitations here, you can do anything from PowerPoint decks, documents, Excel spreadsheets, images, anything that's going to help you create a picture of research that's been done. So as these are uploading, you'll note that they actually took the name from how I had titled the files that I've imported. So if you have naming conventions in the folders that you have internally, that's going to carry over for you. So we do know that some teams actually have like pretty complex folder structures that they're bringing in, and that won't be lost with the bulk import that you can do. So I'm going to open up one of these files. So we've got customer experience digital first. And something I might want to do is actually apply a topic to this. So topics were recently introduced as a way to categorize research for stakeholders coming into your workspace. It could be anything from what it actually is, so the content of that, whether it's like the actual format, or alternatively, if it's like a stage of the research journey, so that you can make it a little bit easier for teams and stakeholders coming into the workspace to get an idea of what's actually in there. And so I'm going to say that this is a market report that we created. I've got some suggested topics there. It's related to the future of the market and digital. And these become search terms that essentially anyone in my workspace can come in, have suggested, or simply find. And from there, easily see all of the past files, decks, readouts related to that specific area. So super helpful for you to sort of consider what's going to work for your team. And also, I think the pro tip of this is really towards the actual, once you've done some importing, is to share this directly out. You're going to start to see views. So it really replaces the old, I've shared this file with you, and you're not really knowing whether that person has had a read of it. You'll actually be able to see the metadata as a small avatar of whether they've actually come in and had a read. And also, of course, engagement through comments and live discussion on the files themselves. Awesome. So that is collections. Have a play around with it. As I mentioned, the first sort of step is like actually collecting and thinking about how we're going to approach bringing more of that research into the repository. Now I'm going to jump into more of the 101 session. So we're actually going to look more into our markup product. So markup is really where, particularly if you're a researcher, full-time researcher or a part-time researcher, product designer, product manager, you might be spending more of your time in markup. Now, this is where you'll kick off a project, do your analysis, and really take your raw data from exactly that raw data to an insight. Now, this first page that we're met with here is called our projects list. Now, project folders, which all of your projects sort of are nested within, can be organized in any way. So we can do most commonly by research phase, by method, by department or team. And you can see here there's a variety of teams in the workspace. We've got product teams who might be interested in more continuous research, like NPS responses, or some product areas, research specific to their product area. Alternatively, you might have a marketing team who's focused on a website refresh or developing messaging that speaks directly to the customer. So thinking about how you might want to set up your projects list, particularly if you're a manager of the space, is something that you can look into. So I'm going to use this website refresh. We've done a usability test in here as our example. So I'm going to click into this one. The first thing that I met with is what's called this project Readme. So essentially it's kind of what it says on the tin. It contains all of the critical information about your project, including the background, participant requirements, research methods, discussion guides. Now, if you're a manager in the product or in markup specifically, you can templatize how you want your team to start projects. Now, if you have a specific way that you do usability tests, or if you have a specific approach to how you do in-depth interviews, you might want to consider creating a couple of templates that helps the broader team get started quite easily. So have a think about that. We'll talk about templates and I'll show you how to create one quickly at the end. But something to sort of take away as homework if you'd like to standardize the way that your teams do research.
Can we ask a couple quick questions? We have some easy questions about project folders and some of the stuff we were looking at on that page.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Rebecca on, can project folders be collapsed to make it easier to scan them?
They sure can. So we're just going to click this arrow just here. And they can quickly be collapsed. Alternatively, if you know the name of your project or if you've implemented some naming conventions, you can quickly search in the finding projects option. So usability will show me the collapsed folders, and then I can just open it up and see that one project that I'm working on. You've also got the option in terms of navigation to like pin a couple of projects that perhaps are like, cross-functional teams are working on, or are more central to the business at the top for ease of navigation. Or alternatively, you can also archive projects when they're done. So yeah, there's a couple of options here.
Awesome. And Maeve asked if we could reorganize your folders if you wanted to change your structure. How might you reorganize if you were on this page?
Yeah, totally. So to reorganize, it's a simple drag and drop. So I might take NPS responses out of feedback and drop it into marketing ownership. We do have some teams that organize their research folders by research stage, which requires a little bit more manual effort. So as you come out of discovery, it might move into another folder, and that would require just this drag and drop action.
Amazing. And one question from Sandrine, going back to topics, just because we're getting some plus ones on that. How would you explain the difference between topics and tags?
Yeah, great question. So topics and tags are two different concepts within Dovetail that are air-gapped between different products. So markup is really, or tags are really the tool that you'll use in markup to apply meaning to what you're synthesizing, so your actual research. Tagging, topics on the other hand, are more of how you might categorize distilled reports and findings. Now, you'll notice in the topic that I created, I wasn't necessarily applying meaning with my topics. I'm more saying like what they are to help a stakeholder find these finished reports. Whereas tagging can be a bit more like specific to the researcher themselves about how you want to come up with like an insight or actually do your synthesis. So I'm hoping that'll become a bit more clear when we get to the tagging phase, but that's the main difference.
Awesome. Let's do one last question on organizing projects, and then we'll keep moving. If we don't answer your question as we go, I'm keeping track and we'll come back to them at the end. So last question on organizing projects. When would you archive a project?
Yeah, good question also. Thanks for these questions. So archiving a project is kind of depends on your flow. Something that it's important to know is that archiving a project, part of the like point of having a repository is that, you know, things aren't like lost generally. You can always sort of retrieve them. So you can archive when the project's complete. So when the research is done and, you know, no one is assigned to that project any further, your final output is created, whether that's like a readout or a story or it's a insight or alternative. But the thing to note from there is that if I go in and search as a stakeholder or as you, I'm still going to be able to see the final output of that because it's contributing to the repository. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that archived might mean that no one's currently working on that project at the moment. It's done. The final output is complete, but that information, like the knowledge we've learned from that, is still available in the repository. So that's how I would think about it, separating it out from work and knowledge.
So good.
Awesome. Keep the questions flowing through. So jumping back in here to our website usability refresh, what I was explaining here is really about this project Readme. So as I mentioned, you can templatize this. It's relatively straightforward, but you can make it as sort of in-depth as you like. It's also a great enablement tool. Like when you do have new researchers starting, it's not uncommon to send people into your projects and say, look, have a read of these project readmes that we did to give you a bit of an understanding of what's been done before and also how we approach research at our place. So I'm going to be working down the left-hand side and I'm going to call out this first container here. So on this sidebar in this first container, we have what's called notes, highlights, and insights. Notes is our flexible object where you house all of your research data. So I'm going to click on first round and show you what a note looks like. So if I click on add note towards the bottom here, I'll show you an unpopulated one first. So as I said, flexible object, this is where you could pull in your research data. Now within this actual project, we've mostly got usability test recordings. But within this note, you can have anything from 10,000 pages of copied text that you want to synthesize. You can have your own note taking from an interview. It wouldn't be uncommon to have this open if you were doing an in-depth interview, obviously, maybe if you were pairing and someone is typing their observations towards the bottom. But I really want you to think about this note as not only being a place that you can have a recording to then transcribe, which we'll talk about, but also a place for you to have things like secondary research, written text for you to start to synthesize. Towards the top of the note, we have a couple of fields. Now, fields are really a way for you to apply structured data to your research. Things like usability test score, any ethnographic information, perhaps like if it's what part of the business that this participant is sort of most closely related to, or when the interview happened, perhaps. Now, thinking about those fields as a team is always encouraged, because it's going to help you slice and dice your information, slice and dice your research when you get to further stages of the synthesis. So this is an unpopulated note just to see what the blank state looks like, and I'll show you now what a populated note looks like. So here we have an interview with Andrew. We've got this populated field data at the top, their role, how they scored on the usability test, and what group they came from. So this is interviews in the second quarter of 2021. I've got here that he's passed the usability test and that they're a designer. So that's going to help me later down the line if I want to sort of search for designers that failed tests or designers that passed tests, or alternatively what we learned from the interviews in that quarter. As I scroll down towards the bottom, the steps that I've taken to really get this interview in is we typically record interviews on Zoom. And in order to do that, we record that on Zoom. We've connected the Zoom integration here, and then it will prompt you, would you like to directly import from Zoom? And you'll say, yes, I'd love to transcribe it also. And then you'll have this lovely transcription here. So this will take a couple of minutes and you can navigate away, make a cup of tea and come back. And then from here, you can start your synthesis. Now, the way that you'll actually do that is by dropping and dragging across the text that you want to apply meaning to. Now, someone asked about tagging, and this is really where the tagging part comes in. So perhaps I'm looking at this and I'm noticing that they're having some difficulty. So difficulty with navigation. Now, these might not exactly line up with the text, but you catch my drift. I'll say difficulty with navigation, and then perhaps the feeling that I'm starting to get here is that's related to negative experience. So I'm going to tag that twice, that block of text, and apply two highlights, two tags to that, one negative experience and one for difficulty with navigation. So it's kind of lining up here. I might, if I'm at this stage, like directly tag someone in the research and say, perhaps a little bit too early, but in a way, never too early in some senses. So I will comment a team member in towards the bottom. I can make a couple of notes as well in the context, but you can fully like tag this up as much as you like. I typically like to do our first round of tagging at this point.
Two quick questions, AM. We asked, can anyone in the organization create tags as they are analyzing the data?
Yeah. Yes and no. So I have just created a tag here, as you've noted, that is specific to this project that I'm in. Now, the reason that that's the case is we don't want to restrict anyone who's starting their own project from creating tags that are held within the container of their project. However, we do have something called extension tags, which are tags that are sit across multiple projects that can help you to do cross-project analysis, as well as create a bit of standardization. So thinking about those tags, extension tags, the ones that you as a research team might decide, these are the things we want to trace, these are the things that are going to come up across multiple projects, and those are the ones that you can actually lock down. So you can say, we don't want anyone to edit these. Yes, they can use them and contribute to those extension tags and the evidence, but they can't actually add anything to those. So those are your global tags. To sum that up, within the project, it's free reign, but there are some ways that we can do some tag management, but your extension tags is where you can apply permissions.
Awesome. And one other question is, say instead of uploading a video and transcribing, we were taking free text notes actually inside of our note. Can multiple people do that at the same time?
Yes, they can. So multiple people can take notes in here. Note my avatar in the top right, you'll just see 2 avatars or 3 or 4, however many people you'd like to collaborate with. But yeah, encouraged. Cool. All right. So that's the notes. What I want to call out here is along the left-hand side, if I select these 3 dots here, as I mentioned, notes, highlights, and insights are our main artifacts. And then we're able to choose from these sort of different layouts how we'd like to use them. Now, this is something we introduced relatively recently, and the reason for that is we kind of decided, or well, we spoke to our customers and learned that research is a lot more flexible, and things like wanting to be able to see your content more visually was really important. So we've introduced different ways of viewing your notes, highlights, and insights. Now, for myself, I typically like to use the note board because I can sort of view hierarchy and have a look at timing more easily. But I could also use a note list. So towards the top, I've actually got a note list of things like the plan for the actual research, so more of a condensed version of the project Readme. I've got the discussion guide that we're going to be using in each of the tests. And then I've also got additional resources. So just a couple of quick tips for perhaps anyone who is new to us, our team, or usability testing. So scrolling down along the left-hand side, I'm just going to click on table. So here I have what's called a highlight table. Now this is really my notes transposed and filtered down for only the highlights that I've created, highlights being what I've applied an actual tag to. So I'm just going to zoom out slightly because what you can see down the right-hand side is all of the metadata that I've applied. So those fields, I've got designer, whether they've passed or failed the test, what interview they came from, and then I've got the tags along here. Now, this is typically where we encourage, if this is part of your process, to do a second round of tagging. So what I can do here is select, as I'm finding themes, I'm going to select the checkboxes along the left, and I might add an additional tag here. Perhaps this is related to the feature user access, and the sentiment here is unclear. I can leverage these filters in the top right to start to show or start to narrow down who are certain aspects of the metadata. So let's say I only want to see who has passed our usability test. And looks like most of our participants did. So the navigation on the website is looking good. So from here, you can start to pull out additional trends. And you can also sort of pull directly out from here highlight reels. So what I'm going to do is select a couple of video highlights. I'm going to download. I can download a short video highlight reel and share it directly with my team in Slack, or however you want to share research midway through the process. So really encourage you to do that and share that little tidbit of what someone has said. Next, I'm going to go to our team sorting activity. So someone asked about collaboration a little bit earlier on, and I want to call that out as being a big part of how you can leverage what's called the highlight canvas. Now, within this canvas, I can actually see all of the highlights from across this project. So you'll note that there are quite a few. And something that I might want to do is either do this solo, or I might want to invite other collaborators from across the business to come in and maybe do some sorting with me to help identify themes and kind of bring them along that journey of what you're learning as part of this website refresh. You've got a couple of tools to help you in the top right called Smart Arrange. Just zoom back in so you can see. Smart Arrange will automatically help you group by tag or by note. So note will be the content of that one note, so all highlights from the note, and then tag will be a bit relational. So as you've done layers and layers, it will group the tags that are that you've grouped together already to sort of help you find themes across your notes and across the multiple rounds of research that you might have done. So I'm going to group this by tag. And here we can also apply additional rounds of tags. So I'm just holding down Shift. Perhaps I've identified that there's another theme here, that this is related to messaging. I might bring this over. And then I can start to and perhaps provide a heading here that explains that something from those highlights that would be relevant for how I'm analyzing at this point. But how we've seen customers use it really well at the moment is bringing people in to gain an understanding of where they are in the research. So have a play around with this, give us your feedback. It's an exciting new way of visually looking at your highlights.
Elizabeth asked about sharing a link to a highlight with someone outside of the system. What if I want to bring in another stakeholder to look at all this great work?
Yeah. Depending on how you want to bring them in, if they're a stakeholder that you're happy to invite as a viewer, you can share them directly with this link, and they will be invited to sign up as a free viewer. That means that they can come in and sort of browse the research. They can comment, but they can't actually contribute, so they wouldn't be able to create any highlights per se. For complete public viewing, that would depend on how it kind of works within the business, and how private or how important privacy is, just for them on sharing that link. But public links is something that you can, like non-private links is something that you can share with stakeholders. We just need to know if they were sort of stakeholders within the org, in which case I'd encourage them to join as a private viewer, as a viewer, or alternatively you can share a private link, but public link, it just depends on what's more important. If you have SSO enabled, something that you can do is it'll be one click for them to sign up for a viewer as well, viewer access also.
Great. We have a fair few questions about setting things up to support things like PII. So why don't we get to that when we have some time at the end? I know that's something that's really important for folks. So we'll go into that a little bit deeper as we get towards the end to open Q&A. So I'll hold those questions.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, so let's move on to the insights piece. I think how we want to approach this is whether you're coming from like a top-down or bottom-up perspective, if you've got something that you want to support, or you're going in completely wanting to find something that's unknown, there's a couple of different ways within Dovetail that you can get to the insight point as we've gone through this. Typically, you might identify a theme while you're looking at a highlight table. Perhaps you're coming up with something when you're looking at sort of this highlight canvas. Whatever it might be, you can simply select on the evidence. So thinking about an insight as well as your observation, what's particularly unknown about it that you want to share with across the org, and then your data points. So when you're finding your data points to support your message, it's as simple as selecting them, navigating to the bottom, selecting Add to Insight, and here you have the ability to create or alternatively add to an insight that you've already created. How you want to do that, whether you want to start with creating them and backing them up or the other way around is up to you. There's no wrong way. So I'm going to say that these 4 pieces of data are actually relevant to, or they support this insight that I've already created, which is titled Customers Need a Way to More Easily Navigate Our Website. So I'm going to click on that. And then down the left-hand side, as I mentioned, you've got this database of insights. And here I have my first insight. Customers need a way to more easily navigate our website. So opening this up, I've got my key pieces of evidence, and I've actually standardized the way that I want my team to create an insight. I want them to have an observation, my fictional team, an observation. I want them to have evidence, and I want it to be actionable rather than something that's nice to have. So this is important to me to create a high quality of insights. So I encourage that this is how they put those together. So I'm going to just drag in an observation that I have here. Let's say that's our observation. These are our data points underneath. So my next step would be to publish this, but before we get there, I also want to show you how you can also look at an insight from that Canvas view as well. Now, we've seen this used really well, particularly with teams that are doing any sort of strategic planning or talking about what's important going into the next quarter as a means of road mapping and prioritization, is having insights on a canvas and actually bringing people in to have a conversation about the output of this project. So I want to call out that this is another impactful way that you can show multiple insights from your project. It's also a great way to show multiple. You could end up with 50 insights towards the end of a project. It just sort of depends on your flavor. One thing I want to add is I'm going to change the view of this insight to an insight board. I'll create one more insight from my table. Back to insights. I'm opening this up. And then something I want you to take note of is the fields that we also have at the insight level. So on the notes, we had those fields and metadata that was most relevant to our like the specifics of that interview or that content of research. But at the insight, maybe something that we want to communicate or encourage is behavior to be taken by viewing the research. I want to make it clear from the hundreds, or that's a lot, but maybe the 10 to 20 insights that come out of this, the ones that I'd love folks to understand are more important than others, what my view is. So I've created this field called criticality, and I'm going to say one is important, but perhaps one is of medium importance, and you can help define that as a team. I've dropped that in here. Then what I can do is I can quickly group by status in the top right, criticality. I could share this out directly with someone on my team, with someone, a senior leader or a manager. And it's very clear to them when we come in, which are the ones that we'd like them to view and take into action more quickly. And that's just one example. Criticality, or alternatively like relevance for audiences, is a big one as well. So something to think about. Final thing before I'll hand over for questions is the tagging container. So underneath this sidebar here, we've got our tags container. These are all the tags that are related to this project. So everything that I've generated within the website refresh. As I mentioned, someone asked earlier about like, how do you sort of halt who can create or contribute to tags? You can also create those extension tags. Any extension tags which are related to a project will appear just underneath, and it will be called extension tags or the name that you've given it. So you can always make it a little bit clearer for people by saying project level, project tags, and then alternatively, your global tags will appear here if you'd like folks to use those as well. So yeah, I'll hand it over for questions.
Oh my gosh, so great. So helpful to see the whole process from deciding to upload and what to upload into your playback instance all the way through to actually generating research and insights. I think that was so great. Before we open it up to general questions, we had a couple questions about sort of collaborating on insights. Specifically, can an insight be part of multiple projects, and how to think about sort of helping insights feel globally relevant across your instance?
Yeah, totally. So cross-project analysis, so being able to link insights within a project, within multiple projects, is something that is on our radar that we need to develop further. We do have a couple of workarounds that we can share with you that can help you to do that using what's called your extension tags. That would be how to do it in the markup product. So workaround would be the best way forward at this point in time. If you want to connect insights that you've created across multiple projects that have themes that align or overlap, what you might want to do is actually leverage stories. So we didn't talk about those in the context of today, but essentially a story is where you can start to create like your research reports and share those out with the team. So just as an example, the future of our market, it's obviously quite a broad topic, and within it you can house things like files, let me use this one, files and insights from across multiple projects. So you can have, let's try this one. It's not limited to the insights that you can bring in. So you can actually construct these from content from across the entire workspace, whether that's highlights, notes, insights, or referencing a project. So the best thing to do in that case would be to bring the insights into a story and perhaps add an observation or a summary of how they're connected today.
So great. Jessica's interested in seeing a little bit more organization in markup. Can you talk a little bit about the data fields that help you organize notes?
Yeah, definitely. So the data fields. So if we're just going to head back to, let's do first round. The data field, you've got a couple of options in terms of types. You've got text, which is obviously your plain text. They could be keywords, numbers, dates, checkboxes, URLs. Single and multi-select fields, as well as people. Now, single and multi-select fields, not to sort of play favorites, but they are quite powerful in terms of helping you to standardize. So you can obviously select from a drop-down that you've created, and you can also lock those down. So if there are things that as an org, you don't want, you're scaling out research perhaps, and you don't want everyone to be able to sort of write the word research with like misspell it, or you want to make sure that things are sort of standard in that way, you can create those field values and lock them down. I think the most common things that we see are ethnographic information, information related to the business, as well as your people data. Now you'll notice that there's this participant option here. That's a people field, which relates to our Backstage product. And essentially there what we have is participants. So anyone who's participating in your research, you can create a person field for, clicking into that, and you can see more of the details about who they are. From a PII perspective, you can lock down who is able to see this in order to, not make it available across the organization. And perhaps you want to pop like a unique identifier there to sort of even disambiguate it further. So what I was saying here with the importance of filters and how they can be powerful is you can quickly use this group by to create a new view. So what I had previously was just note type. So we've got interviews, a couple of planning docs. Then what I might want to do is actually group quickly by usability testing score. And you can actually drop and drag between these swim lanes that will tell you how that will actually change the value within that field. So I'm going to say actually Grace passed, actually Grace failed, and you can actually quickly share out just this view with someone to give them a quick picture of who's passed, who's failed, and sort of share them midway through the research. So I'm glad you were able to see that, because fields are a great one.
Awesome. We've had a question about survey data. So we've been talking a lot about transcription or open text data. How might you integrate survey data into markup?
Totally. So there's a couple of different ways depending on your infrastructure. You can actually just import directly a CSV. So you can create notes from a spreadsheet. We'll actually create individual notes depending on how you've structured your spreadsheet. We can connect through Zapier. So that's pretty common for folks who do continuous research. So whether that's survey responses are collected through Google Forms or Qualtrics, or alternatively, things like NPS feedback through things like Delighted. So I'd really encourage you to have a look through those. We run our own great Voice of the Customer program connected through Zapier, where we collect all of our continuous feedback that's populated that our team then synthesizes. So there really is no limit to that. And then if there is something that you don't see, the old trusty CSV is how you can get that data in. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think one of the coolest applications internally of the way we use Dovetail is our Voice of Customer process. And what you'll see in our Voice of Customer project along the left-hand sidebar there are all of our different listening channels. So actually our support tickets push into our VOC project, our NPS survey data, all of that raw data, and then our team is able to go in and tag and sort and create insights straight from all of those different listening channels. So we've had a ton of success with getting simple survey data into the tool and then using that to sort of flesh out some of the qualitative data we have, which I think is so cool. Yeah, so Adam, to your question about how you analyze it, right? So in the same process that AM just used to analyze more of open text data, you can do the same thing. You can be tagging and sorting insights and highlights and things like that. We had a question about just creating a story. We had been talking about insights. We didn't cover stories. Can we do a high level view of how you take some insights and create a great story?
Sure. So to create a story, there's a couple of different ways. You can actually start from the playback product from scratch. So hitting up in the top right and going new story. Design is not my forte, so I like to leverage the templates that exist here. There's a couple of different prompts. Things like personas is a really one that's used quite regularly. And also something that people use in the day-to-day. So when they're looking to make decisions, they're referring to that persona's story ongoing. So what I might do, let's say we've just got, we're going to do a research readout. I'm going to select that. Here, I'm going to, of course, talk about who's contributed to this story, what the background is, and research findings. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about bringing in insights from across multiple projects. And the way that you do that is simply, again, leveraging this template. I'm going to select this sort of box in the center. I'm going to look for insights. And then I'm going to start to flesh this out a bit. So I've got insights in this knowledge workers project. I've got insights in customer interviews. I'm going to add a short summary here and say short summary that perhaps connects those two. I'll remove this help box. I can add short images, any historical research such as files or secondary research that would contribute to this. And then I can do that again for a secondary insight that I might want to talk in more detail about. Opportunities and recommendations towards the end, always great to incite action towards the end of a story. But in terms of actual content and bringing those insights in, it's as simple as using the search here, finding the insights across projects. This is quite a long drag down, but you would probably mostly be looking at your filters to help you find them more quickly. So I would select the filter, select from projects or published. So published is insights that are like ready to go. They're ready to be seen on the playback repository side of the product. So definitely encourage, before you share something out, publish it. And anywhere that you've created stories with created stories, we'll publish that insight if you've added that as part of your condition. So I'm going to say I want to look at projects is one of customer interviews, and it's showing me these here, and I can piece them all together in this story.
Can I share, Leah asks if I can share this story with someone that's not in my organization?
Yes, again, depends. If you want to share this publicly, you can select share. You can deselect the private. So making it private, and share that link out. Let's actually do that again, private. Cool. So you can simply share this link to the clip from the clipboard and share directly with them. And they'll be able to see just that story. It'll open as if it's like a new Chrome tab with just that content. So they wouldn't be able to browse afterwards, but it is a direct link to that.
Awesome. And Awais asks if we can generate this as a PDF. You
can. To be candid, it's not the most attractive PDF, but it's something that we're working on kind of improving the formatting a little bit. The only thing that you might lose with the PDF is kind of the influential media that's part of things like insights. So for example, if I'm clicking into this insight to know more, I can see the fields that were related to it. I can see the observations. I can see any comments or dialogue. So PDFs, yes, I think will improve the design, because we're pretty much all designers at heart, except for myself. But I think what you stand to lose will be kind of the snippets, but kind of personal preference there.
Amazing. We're jumping around a little bit, but I saw some questions on the new uncategorized column that appears in all of our views. What would be included there? Can you talk us through that?
Yes, sure. So uncategorized is anything that doesn't have a field value applied. So uncategorized will be, let's say we're looking in the top right-hand corner, we're grouped by note type. Now, uncategorized tells me that these three cards don't actually have a note type value. So if I open this up, note type is empty. If I select that and I select getting started, that's going to move across to getting started and leave this uncategorized column. Now, the uncategorized column is a design choice that we made when we introduced views, just to kind of show you slightly that how important fields are when using note boards. Because if something doesn't have a field value, it essentially kind of floats a little bit within the note board. I've got a great FAQ that we can send out after this to give you a bit more of an understanding of the uncategorized folder. But that's essentially how the thinking behind it today. So it's anything that doesn't have a field value related to how this is grouped by in the top right. Cool.
Great. Lots of questions, and I know this is a really meaty topic. If we're going back to stories, there's a question about if we're sharing externally and there's data from markup, who can see the data from markup?
Exciting question.
Yes.
So as of early August, that would mean we're basically introducing, they would be able to see markup content. Today, if you don't have access to markup, as a viewer, you wouldn't be able to. Sorry, I'll retract the viewer part at all. But as of August, early August, you'll be able to see all of the content that's part of that story when you're sharing it. So a bit of a stay tuned moment.
Yeah, we were talking to the playback PM recently, and I think this is what helped me sort of make sense of it. So again, unless you have access to the data in markup that's flowing through to the story, you won't see it in the story. So if you don't have access to it in markup, it won't actually appear in the story. What that means is that stories for people who don't have access to markup don't feel rich. They're not full of content, right? Because they don't have access to that. It's actually because stories were built with the researcher creating the story in mind first, and then the person consuming the story second. So that's the reason that that's something we're layering on in the future, as opposed to something that we started with, is we wanted to really build stories for researchers to feel like they were usable for them for rolling up their research, and felt like a really fully featured tool for the creator of a story. And then in this next stage, we're starting to think about that consumption experience and what it's like to really read a story and make sure you have access to the right things and are seeing the things that are contextual for you without it feeling overly onerous for the researcher to design it and be careful about what's getting shared and what's not. So that's helped me think through, why would I have a story and then not be able to see all the data? It's so that we can be really thoughtful about how we layer that consumption experience in. A big thank you, a big round of applause to AM. She's so wonderful. Go check out her AMAs with AM on YouTube. I dropped a link for that as well. Some of the deeper, more applied questions that we got there, she's already answered in videos. So put those on, create your playlist of AM, and we'll see you all in the Slack community or on a future event.